Not mute anymore. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining today's session, SAP Ariba Central Procurement Automation Framework, and how it can help to streamline purchase requisition processing. My name is Markus Stirnkorb. I'm your host today. I'm a partner at ASAPIO responsible for our S4 and Ariba business unit. One organizational thing before, if you have any questions during the sessions, please use the chat and we'll try to get through them at the end of the session. The questions, if they contain sensitive data, names will be cut off the recording. So why the automation framework first? It's been there for a little bit more than 5 years. When central procurement came up and went live, I was working with this for more than 5 years now. And well, first of all, it's a built-in tool that comes within the core. That means if you have a central procurement license, you get the framework and you can use it. It's built in, it's integrated in your central purchasing process. So you should at least take a look at it and know what it does. Second is, if you search the internet, there's almost no information available. Most information is contained in the SAP help page, and well, that's not a lot. No discussions, no practical experience. That's also why I wrote a white paper, how to set up the framework in a more detailed way. I'll link this when we send out the PowerPoint that you see now. And third of all, I really think that it can help. Maybe not for everyone, but the customers that we had, where it's in use, it really helps in streamlining the processes, in having a central place to put in some automation logic. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. First of all, let's have a quick look at the high-level process flow in central purchasing, especially the bits and parts that are relevant for the automation framework. Then we'll look at the framework itself. First, I'll introduce some general important terms in the framework, and then we'll set it up together. Then we'll look at the integration of the framework into the PPRC app, the Process Purchase Requisition Centrally app, where the user can then see what actually happened. And at the end, let's take a look at some real-life use cases that we implemented and designed, and also at the limitations, because well, surprise, there are some. So let's take a look at the central purchasing process in really high level, and only the pieces that are important for today. In the central procurement, central purchasing architecture, of course, what we need first are a bunch of SAP systems, S4 or ECC. And these systems, they are connected to the central procurement system. And what we want to do within the central purchasing process is we want to replicate purchase requisition data from the connected system into our S4 central procurement system. The replication itself, you probably know, is scheduled as a batch job every minute, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, calls into the connected system, looks, are there any changes, new documents, change documents, replicates the data into the central procurement, and then stores it directly on the database. And that's a big change to your connected system, because the purchase requisition data, it's really basically only persisted on the database. There are no checks, no master data check, field checks, or whatsoever. The data is taken, copied, and then persisted on a database. It's not a real purchase requisition. It's a centrally managed purchase requisition, or a proxy purchase requisition, how we like to call it. And that's a big difference. Once the replication is done, or during the replication, also the centrally managed workflow is triggered if it is configured. Some customers have an approval upfront in their guided buying system, maybe in the connected systems, but also we have customers that are using the centrally managed workflow for purchase requisition, and this is triggered directly within the replication itself. But that's just an optional part and not the focus today. Once the data is persisted in the database, also the automation can kick in. In this case, our automation framework. And the automation framework itself, it's also scheduled as a batch job, meaning I can schedule it every minute, every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever your process needs. and it's running on the entries on the database, basically. So it looks, are there entries that I didn't work with so far? And if yes, then I'm processing it within the automation framework. And if we talk about automation, then there are basically, from a high-level point of view, two outcomes. Either the automation succeeds or it fails. If the automation fails, meaning that we couldn't create a follow-on document or trigger a follow-on process, then basically somebody has to take a look at it and decide what to do with the document. And this is done in our PPRC app in the central purchasing process, where the purchaser then takes a look at the document and then creates the follow-on document manually, or maybe rejects it, or maybe does something else with it. If the automation succeeds, the follow-on document is automatically created by the automation framework. Here it's only follow-on document, but of course it could be anything. It could be a follow-on process. It could be also rejection that is automatically done, or I want to inform somebody. And that's really the high-level process. Data is replicated, then we take it, we try to automate it, we succeed or we fail. So let's take a look at the framework now and the most important terms. And the most important terms in the framework itself are actions. And actions are simply, they contain the logic you want to perform during the automation. It could be anything, but in the automation framework itself, we categorize it into three categories. The first being check actions. Check actions are simple actions that check for something, for simple field values. I want to check if the PR contains material group A or material group B. These are simple checks that I can actually do without any code in the framework. Or if it's a more complex action, for example, if I have some exclusion or inclusion lists in the system, in some tables, even in a connected system, then I could implement custom logic to read these tables and verify the data of the PR against these tables. And that's the most common way of doing it. Usually I always need some custom code, but there are bodies available which can be used also if we talk about clean core. And the check at the end, very important, it either succeeds or fails in the automation framework. So I have two outcomes basically. The next category is a modify action. A modify action is an action that modifies data in my purchase requisition. For modifying the data, I also have a simple action available in standard where I can manipulate the data, but in a very limited way. So for example, if I have material group A, then I could put another field value to an X, for example. Also in real life, honestly, nothing that we usually use. Also here, usually a custom implementation is required. For example, a complex purchasing group determination. So if you want to have a central purchasing group determination in your central procurement system, this could be implemented in the automation framework within a body using a modify action. And the third action type is a complex action. A complex action is something that works not only on the purchase requisition data, but does something in addition, typically something like a follow-on document creation. So now I want to create a purchase order out of the purchase requisition, or maybe I want to trigger an interface or notify someone. These are complex actions. Also, there's a body available that can be used to implement complex logic. But in addition, three complex standard actions are already delivered for the creation of the purchase order, for the creation of a central contract, and also for the creation of a source to supply assignment, which looks into the connected system, searches for contracts and purchase info records, and looks and assigns the source actually if a single source is found, similar to the source supply assignment that we know from our old SRM system. So, and the actions itself, they are set really old school. So now you can see that's a screenshot from the system. That's SAP GUI. That's really a customizing table. And in this customizing table, I'm defining all the actions that I need. It's just pure definition. You can see in our case, I have the first three standard action for source supply assignment, central contract creation, PO creation, and then I created three more action, a simple change action, with which I can change field values, A check actions, a simple one, which I can use for checking certain field values, and a CTM check action, a C part management check, for which I have a body implementation available. You can see here. So there is some custom logic behind. And then every customer has different entries here. Whatever you need, whatever actions you need, you maintain it here. And then the logic, of course, is contained in an implementation at the end. That's done in a customizing. And you can imagine this is your tool set that you can then use. So these are the actions, the most important, the central piece of our automation. That's where the logic is contained. So if you want to set up our framework, then there's one more term that it's important. That's the rules. The automation framework contains rules, and the rules, they define how your actions are used, which actions are used. And the rules itself, you can have one or many. Also, depending on your need, could be only one rule, could be one rule per system, could be one rule per document type, whatever. That's totally free. There is no real best practice. That's to be decided in a project. And the rule consists, first of all, contains selection criteria. The selection criteria are there to define which purchase requisitions should be picked up by this rule. For example, if I want to have a rule for document type NB only, then I need to specify this in the selection criteria so that my first rule only picks up NB document purchase requisitions. So these are the selection criteria, and they work basically on all the fields of the purchase requisition. We'll see it later. And then the most important thing, within the rule, my actions are contained. So within the rule, I define which actions I want to execute, and very important, in which sequence I want to execute them. Usually, I want to execute some checks first, then I want to do maybe some changes on a document, and then in the end, I want to trigger a complex action like PO creation. And I need to set them in sequence and tell the system what to do, and this I do in the rule. So how do I set this up? How do I create a rule? And this is done via two Fioris, or via one Fiori Apps. There are two main Fiori Apps for the whole automation framework, in addition to the customizing table we saw before. But the customizing table, this is used once maybe for setup to define your tool set. The real magic happens in the Manage Rules for Automation of Business Processes app. This is where I define everything. And the second app is the Schedule Automation of Business Processes. That's the app with which I can schedule the whole framework as a batch job. So enough talking. Let's take a look at the system. And let's configure something, because I think that's what we waited for. That's my Fiori Launchpad here. The important app I put on my home. And let's start with the Manage Rules for Automation of Business Processes. Here you can see it's empty. So currently I deleted all my old rules so that we can create a new one. So let's create our own rule now. First, I give it a name. I want to create a purchase order. I activate the rule. I need to define the business object. That's my replicated purchase requisition. It's valid from today till tomorrow. It should only run for disconnected systems. So that's already my first selection criteria, basically. Which system should this rule be applied to? So only purchase requisition that come from the S4D system should be now considered. In addition, I want to have some more selection criteria, because very important. What I want to do, I want to create a PO. And the PO, I can't go and try to create a PO for every purchasing document or for every purchase requisition. No, I want to check first if this purchase requisition contains a purchase contract, meaning that's a call-off. So I'm checking for the field, is there a purchase contract assigned to this purchase requisition item? That's my selection criteria. PRs that don't have a contract assigned are not selected. Second section criteria, now I have to do it again, is I don't want to take deleted item because the framework itself is first of all stupid, kind of. It's not stupid, but I have to tell them exactly what to do. So I don't want to take deleted items, quite obvious. And the third thing I want to do now is I only want to take purchase requisition that are created from today on. So I take the creation date and I tell the system, okay, only select purchase requisition that have a creation date greater than yesterday. So, because otherwise, if you start a framework and if you replicate 100,000 old purchase requisition, you start a framework, then bam, you get them all. That's what you don't want at the beginning once you set it up. So creation date is one thing to separate it. Activity, let's forget it by now. That's just the method to create action, to group actions, but that's nothing we need for now. And now comes the fun part. Now we create our first action. And the first action is a check action for a purchasing group. That's just something that I made up. In real life, that might not be the case, but that's something that I can just define in here to simulate or to show you what's possible. So I just define, okay, now I want to do a simple check action. That's done by the action definition here. The next thing is that for this action, I can define what should happen if the action passed or if the action failed. In case this action passes, nothing should happen, because if it passes, then actually I want to create a PO. But if the action failed, then I want the automation to fail. That's what I do now. So here with this status, I can tell the system what status it should set on the purchase requisition. And this status, very important, is then also visible for the purchaser. So that's an indication if the automation failed or if it succeeded. The prerequisite is the tool in order to set actions in sequence. So with a prerequisite, I say, should there be another action executed beforehand? In our case here, no. That's the first action. So this stays empty for now. Same with the input, because this is directly dependent on the prerequisite. And then with parameters, we actually say on which field we want to do the check. And in our case, what we want to do, we want to check for the purchasing group. And we want to check, is the purchasing group in this document item 002? And that's our check action, done. Next is, now we want to create a PO action. So also created action definition. This is the standard action. So everything I did now without coding comes for free. And in this case, what happens? Okay, if my PO action is running, if it's succeeded, then of course, then the document is automated, then the PO was created. If it's failed, then the automation failed. Prerequisite, well, now we have a prerequisite. Now we have the check action as a prerequisite because I want to run the check before. And the input depends on this check. And I only want to execute my PO creation action if the check passed, meaning if the purchasing group is 002. The parameters here for the PO creation is empty now, but it can be used for grouping purchase orders. So the standard it's possible if the automation framework runs once per day, it would get all the new purchase requisition and then bundle them. Meaning if you got the same vendor, same company code, same purchasing org, and so on, same header data, you will end up with one PO that has 1,000 items. Well, if you want that, fine. Some customers say, no, I want to group them. And then here, I want to group them per plant. I want to have one PO per purchase requisition. That can be done with this parameter here. and it applies to all the fields. So, and now we're ready. That's what we did. So now I defined the automation framework. I defined one rule containing two actions. First action, check the document for purchasing group 002. Second action, try and create a PO. And that's it. So what are we going to do next? So let's quickly, well, it's old school now, but actually it's faster a little. Let's quickly try and create a purchase requisition, replicate it, and then run the framework on it. All live now. So here we can see now I got a purchase requisition. It got an outline agreement, a contract assigned, and the purchasing group is 001. So let's save it. It's 1442. Now let's get into the central procurement system. Now I'll replicate the data. So that's the report that replicates the purchase requisition data into the central procurement hub. Usually this is scheduled, but we don't want to wait for it. That's why we schedule the import now. So what we want to do now is we will import this purchase requisition into our central procurement system. Let's have a sneak peek. That's our purchase requisition centrally app. Let's search for the purchase requisition. As you can see, it's already there. Meaning that as soon as the purchase requisition is on the database, you can view it as a purchaser. That's something to discuss. But you can see the automation status is empty. But it's now the purchase request in central procurement, it's on the database. So next thing is now we schedule the automation framework. Let's do it. For this, we'll execute the SAP app, schedule the framework. So it was the fast schedule automation of business processes. We create a job and we schedule it. Here you can see it's in process and you can see, okay, it failed. So let's see what the purchaser sees. Now let's execute this intent. And now you can see, now I have a direct indication for the purchaser. Okay, the automation failed for this purchase requisition. So what can I do now? The first thing is I can mark the purchase requisition item. I can go to more actions and then I can display the automation errors. And you can see here that my check action, check purchasing group, it failed. And because it failed, also the PO action was not executed. I know now this is not really a nice metrics, but keep in mind, we just use standard, no piece of code. If I implemented this check action on my own, then I could have issued an error message that is more meaningful. So that's also a plus when, of course, you do an implementation. But this is for free. And now we can see, okay, it failed. So what I can do now as a purchaser is, okay, I know it could be maybe that because of the purchasing group. So let's change it. So let's reassign the purchasing group to 002. This I can do from the PPRC app. Now I can change some data because that's a usual process also. Automation fails, I get it as a purchaser, I change some data, and what I can then do, and that's a big plus of this framework since it's integrated, now I can go and I can re-trigger the whole automation framework with different data right away. So let's do that now. So I re-trigger it. And let's see if something changed. Now it's gone. Let's see, because I have here processes that is not edited. I have open PO, so something happened. And now you can see, oh, it's automated. So what happened is now I got a failed automation. I knew the reason why it failed. I changed some data from the PPC, I re-triggered it, and now the PO was created. And that's basically the, let's say, the beauty of it, because it's built in. Okay, running out of time. So we set up the framework within 5 minutes. I replicated PR, we executed the rule on a purchase requisition item, and we saw what happened, and we saw what the purchaser sees and what he could do. This needs some tweaking. This needs an implementation usually, of course, but it should give you a quick glimpse of what can be done. And so let's then switch back to the presentation and take a look at some use cases real quick, what we implemented so far. The first use case that we had, it was pretty much the most complex case, is the search for a source of supply assignment, but not only for contract and use the standard action. No, we implemented an own action. And this action contained multiple steps. First of all, we tried to look for low-hanging fruits. Are there contracts available, or maybe even old purchase order where we could take the price from? If yes, then we assign it. If no, then we check if the PR is eligible for an automatic sourcing process. So we had a third-party sourcing software for which an interface is available. But there are some checks to be done in order to see if the PR could use for this process. And if it's eligible, then we trigger the interface to this sourcing software. We send the PR data over, and then the PR is sourced. And together with triggering the interface, we also set the status on the PR itself so that the purchaser now knows this PR is in external sourcing. So the automation failed basically, but because it's in external sourcing. And then when the sourcing is done, there's also an interface existing for updating the PR data. When the PR data is updated, this means that the automation framework can run again. Then the PR is updated with a vendor, with a price, and the PO is created automatically. It was a very complex case. There are really some details to it that are not that easy, but it works. And it's a really, really nice process and showcases how you could leverage third-party software, third-party automation software whatsoever. Second one is a C-part management process where we implemented really extensive checks for C-part management. First, check the values, check for exclusion lists, excluded supplier, blocked supplier materials, and if eligible, try and create a PO. And if not possible to create a PO, then really deliver dedicated error messages to the purchaser so that he knows exactly why the automation failed, why it couldn't be automated. And then the purchaser knows exactly why and can make his decision based on these messages. Third one is, of course, every tool can be integrated. You could integrate sub-built process automation. That's a tool that Max, my colleague, showed last month in a webinar. You could trigger interfaces into everything and then basically follow the process from search for source supply assignment up front. Limitations, yes, there are some, unfortunately. First of all, the performance of the standard modify action. That's really slow because what I showed you before, if I want to change a standard field without any code, then the PR is updated in the connected system and the replication is triggered. And this is done one by one, meaning that if I have 100 documents that need updating, then this takes a while. But usually you're not using this action. The second thing is the workflow kicks right in during the replication and before the automation. And in some use cases, it might make sense to wait for the workflow to start until my automation is finished. So this is something where a little bit more flexibility would be nice. We implemented something with which I have this flexibility, but this is not clean core anymore. But maybe the standard will deliver something. The standard actions are unfortunately often not enough. The create PO action, it works, you just saw it, but if you get in detail, if you talk about custom fields and other things, then it's usually limited and you can't really use it. Instead, you have to implement your own action, but you can use the standard coding as a template. It's simply that because of the OData service that's used is very limited, it relies heavily on the PR data in the backend system. And the assign services apply action, it's the same one basically used in the SRM system. It's not, you can't really tweak it. And so if you want it, you can use it as a template and then put some custom logic in there. That's the best way of doing it. The messages in PPRC, they need several clicks, but I'd say that's okay. And it's also the standard messages, what you just saw might not be enough, but you can also tweak it with custom messages. And yeah, the enhancement capabilities, if you follow a strict clean core approach, then sometimes it's hard to enhance it, as simple as that. Sometimes there are some small things you want to enhance, but that's the same throughout the whole system. So really, if you set up the framework, if you have a clean core strategy, then it needs to be aligned and you need to decide how to do it and where to do it. Summary and key takeaways, because I'm out of time already. I think it's a good tool that can help, and foremost because of the tight integration into the PPRC app, because the purchaser actually sees what's going on, he can re-trigger the framework, he gets the messages. That's something you don't have if you, let's say, simply hook up the sub-build process automation and get feedback, some feedback, then you don't have this tight integration in the PPRC app, or if you want to use Microsoft Power Automate. I think the integration into the PPRC is one of the biggest benefits. The functionality is for free and built in. If you want to use it, there will be coding required. There's no way around it. Really, no customer uses it without any coding, but there are bodies available where you could put in your custom logic and you can align it with your clean core strategy. And the automation framework, of course, needs to fit into your overall procurement process. That's also important. That's what we didn't talk about today, where are demands coming from, how to separate them. I mean, that's one thing that you usually decide within a project, and yeah, really happy to discuss here. All right, that's